Hello everybody and welcome back to the channel. You're watching Indigo Tech Tutorials, and in this video I'm going to be building a new feature for my web framework, which I just made a video about that you can watch where I explain how I built my own web framework. But this has been a big project that I've been working on lately over the past month, and I'm really working to make this framework as good as possible, and it could possibly even be something that people start using and like it could become popular. So I'm really excited about working on this and just seeing where it goes. Anyways, in this video, I'm going to be building a new feature on the framework, and I figured I could take you guys along and show you the whole process of me working on building my own web framework and just what it's like being a developer working on a project like this. So in this video, I want to build view helpers. So view helpers is really a concept from Ruby on Rails mostly. So in Ruby on Rails, you have all of these helper methods that you can do, which write HTML for you. And I'll kind of explain this more, but let me just go to like some code. Let me just write some code so you guys can see. Just create like an empty file. It has to be Ruby. Or actually it would be what, ERB. So Ruby on Rails uses ERB, which is embedded Ruby inside of HTML. And what it looks like is just like this. So you have like percent, or you have the like the what is this called, caret percent equal. But this allows you to do embedded Ruby. So this could be anything, printing a message to console, although that doesn't really make sense from ERB. It would more be like maybe hello plus, so you could do like Ruby code. Anything that you can do in Ruby, you can do right here inside of your HTML template. And then you can mix this with HTML, like putting this inside of an H1. But anyways, Ruby on Rails gives you these view helpers. So even for creating a form, you would say like form width URL. You get something like this. Whereas in HTML, you'd have to do like form action equals, and you even have to specify the method to use. So Ruby on Rails has all these helpful methods, these these view helpers. I guess it is kind of form helpers is what we'll be focusing on. So that's for the form. Then you also have things like a link to, so being able to create a link without actually writing any HTML. So we could say like link to new post, and then this goes to new post path, which these are URL helpers. So helpers that give you the URLs. I also have to build something like this, but I'm not going to focus on that in this video. So instead, I'm just going to focus on building these view helpers. And yeah, look, this would be the same as adding like an href equals post slash new, and then putting the text here. So as you can see, when you have these view helpers, you can just write Ruby instead of writing HTML, which is something that I do want to have in my framework. All right, let's get into this. So I'm going to start by showing you an example app that I built with my framework. So this is the social app. So let me come into here and let's take a look at this app. So to start it up, we can say bundle. Actually, we don't have to say bundle. We can say Jetski S, just like Rails S. And oops, I am getting an error. It's saying you already have one SQL, but your gem file requires another SQLite. This is annoying. So I'm gonna have to figure out this little issue. So apparently my gem is using one version of SQLite, whereas my app is using another version. And I think I see the reason is because back in my gem, I have a certain version mapped in my gem spec. But this is just kind of, it's irrelevant. So I guess maybe to fix this, I can run bundle. No, still giving me a problem. Well, I know I can fix this if I run bundle exec, which that just means that I want to make my app use the local Jetski version. And as you can see, that works. So I'll have to figure out that issue later on. Now, this is the social media app right here. I want to delete all these posts right now, so I think to do that, well, actually, if I delete the database, it's going to delete the schema. So of like the post table, it's going to delete that table. And I don't have an easy way to get that back without recreating it. So as you can see, my framework does have some issues. That's why it's not like fully done. It's definitely not fully done. And it's not really ready to like use, for sure not ready, because there's still a lot to do. But the fact that I have built like, this far to even be able to create an app with a custom framework is pretty cool. Oh yeah, but look, here's the thing I just saw. So for some reason, when creating a new post, all of the other posts get updated, which I don't know why that is. I really don't know why. But anyways, that's not really what I'm going to focus on right now, although I should be focusing on it soon. I want to talk about view helpers. So that's the point of this video. I'm going to build a view helper solution for my app so that you can use the Ruby methods, or you can use Ruby to do things like generating a link or creating a button, which right now you can't do. And I'll show you. If I go to my views and I go to my posts index, you'll see what we have going on for our app. It's all completely HTML. Well, there is some embedded Ruby, so I am using embedded Ruby, but I don't have the helper methods like we have inside of Ruby on Rails. So that's why, like, for things like links, I have to actually write the HTML and say like a instead of href, and then do everything manually. But in Rails, I would just do, a link to helper method instead. And also down here for the form, I'm writing out the form manually, and I'm like writing the label, writing the input. But in Rails, I would definitely just use the helper methods. It's not like this is bad, because this works and it's exactly the same. It's just Rails has helper methods that make the experience a little easier for a developer. Like, I've gotten so used to it that I don't really like writing these like anchor tags, but it's still fun. Like, either way, it's still fun. You're writing code. But I want to create these view helpers just because it gives my framework, it makes my framework even better. And that's the whole point, is I want to make my web framework as good as possible. And I can even like build features that Rails doesn't have or they don't want to add, because, well, I have total control over what goes into the framework because I created it myself. Yeah, it's funny. So now that I see this issue with the database, I really just want to focus and fix this because it's kind of annoying. But there's so much to do in my framework. Like, I don't even have a way to really delete the items from the database. But I'll show you something cool real quick. So I don't know if I talked about this in the last video, but I actually created my own console. Just like Rails has the Rails console, I created a Jetski console. So if I do Jetski console, or you could just do Jetski C, like Rails C, you can go into the console. And I will say it's not as cool, not as good as the Rails console, because you'll see, like, if you go into the Rails console, you get all of your like classes. I guess you have like typing, like autocomplete. I don't know how they really do that, and I think there's something else like, but no, this console is very, very good, because what I do is I load all of your classes and objects from your app the same way that I do when you start the server. So I load all the models, I load the controllers, so we can talk to like the post controller, for example. We can get that class and we can check out its methods. And I guess what else does this have? We can even create a new instance, but we have to give it, of course, this expects something. If I go back to my Jetski code base, so let's open up my web framework. So, it's called Jetski. That's just what I called it. I don't know. I thought it was cool, and the gem name was available. But if we go in here and we go to our base controller, this is where I define the code for the controller, and we're initializing it with res, which is short for response. So we take the response from the web server, and the response is an object that allows you to set different things on the response that we're going to send back to the browser. So we can set the body. So of course, what the user gets, like the HTML itself. You can set the content type. So we have code in here to do all that, but we have to initialize it with a response. But of course, we can just pass in something like a string. It's not really going to cause any issue. And we just initialized our post controller. And then if we wanted to call .render on it, well, basically then we run into some errors because the response isn't right. But yeah, here we have a render function, which I tried to build similar to Rails, and it allows you to render. Right now you can render just text. So let's say you're building like an API or like a endpoint that you just want to render something short, and you can render JSON too, which of course this is more helpful for API development. So you can just have an endpoint that renders back JSON, and as you can see, it sets the content type automatically in both of these cases. And then down here, I was just rendering the template by default, but recently I moved it into its own separate class, and I did that for a reason that leads me to this point. So before, when we were rendering the template, we were doing it right inside of this controller, so it had the scope of this controller. But what I want to do inside of the templates is, if you're familiar in Ruby on Rails, inside of a view, let me go back to my social app and I'll show you. So like on my views post index page, for example, this is getting very big. There's a lot of code here. I even have like a whole modal for the new post modal. I just shoved it at the bottom. And in Rails, what you can do is you can move this into something called a partial, which is just another file. It starts with an underscore, but allows you to render it. And you can do something like right here, render modal. And that's something that I want to add to my framework so I can have partials just like Rails. But the problem with this is that in the scope where we're rendering the template inside of the base controller as a scope, when you call render, it's actually just calling this method right here that's already defined. And this has nothing to do with rendering a partial, right? This is about rendering something from the controller, like rendering a response in the controller. So I knew I had to separate that. So I was like looking into this, trying to figure it out. And I guess I realized that I needed to create a separate class. And you know how I realized that is because I saw that when Ruby on Rails renders something, they don't render it in the context of the controller. They have a whole action view renderer or something, and that includes all the helpers. So that's how you include the view helper. So I realized, oh, okay, so I need to create my own class, and then when I render the template, it's in the context of that class, which means it only has the methods available there. And I want the methods to be different than the ones available in the controller, because these are the methods that I have available to the template are the ones that you can use inside of your, ERB, inside of embedded Ruby. So in Rails, you have like all of the view helpers, link to, button to. You even have like the helpers for including JavaScript and style sheets, like JavaScript include, and all those different helpers. And I want to build those too, like basically everything that I use in Rails, I'm going to try to put into my own framework eventually. Anyways, if we go into our view renderer, this is what it looks like. This is what I did the other day. I just took a lot of the code from the controller and moved it in here. And basically all it's doing is this is responsible for rendering a template. And it does that it's really like not even too flexible at the moment because I've just moved it in here, and it's very like specific. So it's useful for rendering the template for an action in the controller, and it's going to be like the current action. So you can't really call this because we're delegating like action name to the controller. So what happens is we pass in the instance of the controller to our view renderer, and then we have access to that controller. But inside of the view renderer, we have the scope of this class, which means the methods available here are available to our template. At least that's what should be happening. Now I did have to do this code down here, which I documented. So what was happening is after I moved the render, which the render is really just right here. What's happening is we're processing the embedded Ruby by reading the ERB template. So we start with the layout. And if you're familiar with Rails, you have a layout, which is like the main HTML boilerplate code. And it has the head section, it has the body, and inside the body, that's when the template's rendered. So I have the same thing in my framework. I'll show you. So we have inside the views, we have layouts, and I have an application.html.erb, and boom, you'll see it actually looks probably very similar to Rails. There's just a few things missing, like we don't have the helper methods yet, and Rails has some things set in here. But we have the yield, which this is where, you know, our pages are getting rendered, and then we have the head section. So anyways, back to Jetski. What's happening is we're rendering ERB, and that's where this function comes in here, where we're saying like template equals ERB new with, you know, the content of the file. And then this is the part that actually, I guess, renders it and like runs the Ruby code, because it has, think about it, has to run the file and has to go and run the Ruby code inside of it. Which, yeah, all of that is really cool. I like ERB. But anyways, when I ran it, look, when I ran it just right here in the method at first, it was breaking. It didn't work because we lost the scope of the instance variables. So watch this. If I go and restart, or if I go and just start my server and I go back to my app, you'll see an error now. Undefined method reverse for nil. Now, where was I doing reverse? If we go to my social app, I was doing this on the posts variable, at posts, which I have defined inside of my post controller. So if we go to the post controller, I have at post defined here. So what's happening is we lost the context of our definition inside the controller to our template file. So that's what was happening here. And it's because we're rendering this template inside of a new class instead of rendering it inside the controller like we were before. So I fixed this by finding out this piece of code where you can actually run instance eval on any class to run code in the context of that class or that object, which, whoa, that's very, very cool. So basically it's the same as running code back here inside of the base controller, or inside of the initialized controller that we have passed in. So it's some crazy cool stuff. So I just ran instance eval and then I ran the code, and now we have the context of our instance variables passed in. So that's like, wow, that works. And yeah, it's really, really cool stuff. But anyways, what I'm hoping is that now we do have access to all the methods defined here as well, but I haven't really tested this out. So we can test it right now by saying like render. Let's create a method called render, and then just see if this is available to our template. So we're gonna have to go back to our social app and try to use this method. Let me see here. So yeah, I could start by building the render method, because I want to do that anyways for creating like partials and stuff. So let's do render modal. Let's reload, and oh, it works. So we get an error, but it's a good kind of error because it's saying wrong number of arguments, given 1, expected 0. And that's because, well, let's go back to our Jetski code. In the render method, we aren't expecting any arguments. So let's expect like path to file. And then I think we have to restart the server. Reload. We're still getting the same error, given 1, expected 0. Okay, that's not good. Expected 0. So now I'm worried that maybe it's using the render method from the base controller back here, because we're running it inside of the context of that controller. So that's one problem that, I'm not happy about. Let's just try something instead of render. Let's try like another method, like let's just say hello world. So we'll do a hello world method on this view renderer, and what hopefully happens is inside the template we can access the hello world method. So let's go back to our social app, and instead of even passing in anything, let's just try to run hello world in embedded Ruby. And ideally this would just work. And it says, nope, undefined local variable or method hello world for an instance of post controller. So what that's telling me is that my code does not work. So when I do this instance eval, it's actually, excuse me, it's getting rid of the whole purpose of this separate class. So the reason why I created a separate class is because I wanted to render a template in the context of a new class and include all the methods in this class, just like Rails does with the action view base. But when I do a controller instance eval, it's just running the code back there. So it's the same as like I never moved it, which, oh, this doesn't make any sense. So I guess I can't do controller instance eval, or maybe I can, but I just have to include the helper methods like right here. I wonder if that's possible. Like we could say controller, or actually we can just run code inside of here. Like if we said define method hello world and then pass it in a block, because I've been working with this there's a method in Ruby called define method, which I've done around in my code, which allows you to dynamically define methods on, a class or an instance. I don't know if it'll work. I think, no, this won't work. I think you have to run class eval. So you have to say like controller dot class eval, or even like class dot class eval, and then do define method. So I think that's what I've been doing recently. And I mean, I don't know what that error is about. Undefined method gsub for an instance of symbol. Huh. I actually don't know what they mean by that. Let's try to figure this out. In the view renderer line 16, so it doesn't seem to do, no, it has to, I think, yeah, it's probably mad about my code. Yeah. Oh, look, undefined method class eval for an instance of post controller. So I think if I say controller.class.class eval, but yeah, it did not like that. Yeah, it's not liking that. Maybe I'll try to keep this simple. Nope. Okay, it's not liking this. Now, if I look at my code for wherever we're doing define method, okay, back in the model, we're doing this. We're saying self.class.class eval, and we're defining a method inside of initialize. So we're defining like methods when we initialize the object, which, ooh, that's pretty cool. And it seems like right here we could do that too, but I'm not really sure. Oh, how about we do it inside the instance eval? We say controller.class.class eval. Ooh. Maybe it'll like that better. And then what if we so I think inside of the class eval, you can define methods on the class. Right, we were doing that before. Yeah, right here, we're defining a method on the class. So if I said, although wait, I'm forgetting like why I even wanted to define a method here. I guess, because I want it to be available. But I don't think you'd want to define it on the, if I want it to be available to, if I want a method to be available to the template, I don't think it should be a class method. It should be an instance method. So in that case, maybe I should just try to say define method outside of the class eval. And now inside of here, we just say, hey, whoops. So let's see what happens. Undefined method, define method for an instance of post controller. So apparently they don't know about define method, which is, it's not a method on the post controller, but it's a method in Ruby. So I'm not sure why it doesn't know about this. Oh, maybe, oh look, when they call define method, it's happening outside of a method. It's happening inside of a class. So I guess when you do it in an instance eval, you lose the access to define methods. So we do have to do a controller.class.class eval to define our method. Oh, this is crazy. I think if we do this, we go back to, oh wait, undefined local variable or method controller. Huh? Oh, look, controller. So I'm doing inside of instance eval, I'm trying to call controller, but remember, because we're inside of the scope of this object, we just need to call self. Oh, I'm learning a lot. And then it works. Okay, so what was the point of this? I'm not sure. No, I am sure. So look, hey, we have hey here. So we should see hey somewhere around here. Well, of course we have hey everywhere. So let me try to say like, hey YouTube. Save, reload, and then let's look up hey YouTube. So I don't see it. Let me go back to my social app. Oh, we're not calling hello world even. So let's call it in the view. Oh wait, I'm calling it way at the bottom. That's not going to show up. Let's call it like up here. Look, it says hey. And then I think we have to restart the server for a new message. And it says hey YouTube. So it looks like doing this does work. So we're able to actually define methods like this. Now, what if we also can do stuff, instead of define method, we can say like include a class. That could be a good idea. And look, way up here, we have view helpers. So I guess I've already kind of started on this. So I have jetski helpers, view helpers. So if we go to jetski helpers, view helpers. Oh, look, I was starting to work on a render method where you could render the path to file. So we already have a helper file set up. Although in this is not done yet. All we're doing right now is just trying to like create a path to the file. But this is not complete at all. This is really, yeah, it's not really anything. But we do have a module created and we are including it already. So really what we want is we don't want to even include it right here because we don't need to do that. We need to somehow include it on our controller. So if we could somehow just add this here, like inside of the class eval, include the view helpers, then we should have access to the methods. And to test this, let's go and let's do the hello world method inside of our view helpers module. Okay, this is cool. And then back, stop the server. Let's go back to our social app and let's make sure that we're trying to run this on the page. There we go. And let's restart. And load, and yo, it works. Hey, this is cool. So, okay, I think we figured out what's, yeah, I think we figured this out. Now, the one thing that I'm kind of realizing though is that I did this work to move the code from the base controller. Like this was just a method. See, the view render class was just a method in here, and I moved it out because I thought that you know, I would use the scope of this class, but we're really just using the scope of the controller, so it kind of seems like pointless. But now that I think about it, I mean, look at the amount of code here, right? This is like 90 lines of code, and it's all kind of just specific to this feature. So if you think about it, it really is a good thing that I moved it out. It's like just doing some cleanup work before I really like get to what I wanted to do anyways, which was this. And I mean, yeah, this works really well. So the only like question would be, maybe, is this the most performant way to do it? Because as you can see, every time that we're processing the embedded Ruby, we are also including this view helper. I mean, I don't know if this is like, if this makes this slow or something, or if this has to include it every time, but that's kind of what it seems like. So the question is, is this needed? Because as you can see, we run this multiple times. Like we run this when we're rendering the layout, and then we run it when we're rendering the action right after inside of it. So like including this, I feel like it would already be included, but at this point. Now we do need this just to run template result for rendering the template with the scope of the instance variables from the controller. So the question, maybe we shouldn't have that there anyways. Maybe, this is so funny, but maybe we should just go back to the base controller and include it right here. This is so silly. Look, because we also have code here for, I've created this reactive form module, which even has like a helper method, just like Rails reactive text area, which is just a text area that makes a post request to a certain URL. So that was like my first front end library that I did, just very small for this framework. And I want to do stuff like that so that you don't have to write JavaScript. You can just write some Ruby and it'll do JavaScript. And I even want to do like solutions for CSS where you can write Ruby and like style the page with Ruby. Oh, that'd be so cool. But yeah, this is hilarious. So all of that brought me back to including this, and now I think we have an issue with the load order where it's saying it doesn't have this available. So I have to go back to the Jetski main file, and I have to make sure that our view helpers down here are included before the base controller. So I have to move it all the way up here. So that load order, it's so funny, but like the load order can really break or make your app or your library. It's funny. So all of that, basically all of that work, just to say that, oh, I could just include it here. That's funny. But we got to mess around and kind of learn some things there, I guess. Right, so where was I? I'm gonna go back to social app and I'm gonna make sure that the hello world code works. Yeah, it does work. So we're good to go. We can start working on this. And all we have to do is just include that. Now the question, basically I created this whole view renderer class for no reason, but you know what, I'll take it because I can use it for organization, just to like organize this code into one place, I guess. But I really could have just left it back in the base controller. Yeah, that's funny. But from here, we can go to the view helpers file and we can start defining some view helpers. So I guess the first one that we can do is we can define the render. So we can render another file, which should be a partial, similar to how Rails does this. So yeah, I think that's what I'll work on next. Okay, so right here, I already had got started on building this render method, but all we have is, file join, and I'm trying to find a path to the template that they're going to render. So let's just say that someone, well, like me, is trying to render a partial like modal. And if we go to social app, we have our modal right here. Let's say that I want to take this and stick it into a partial. So inside of the views post folder, I'm going to create a new file. It calls _modal.html.erb. And I think partial is really just a concept in Rails to differentiate the regular templates with the ones that are going to be shared. And of course, the partial starts with the underscore. And I might just take that and use it for my framework, because why not? But if I go down here and I say render modal, what I'm expecting is that, when I render the page, it's going to render that modal file. And when I run this, I get wrong number of arguments given when expected 0. Oh, and guys, this is so hilarious that I just realized this. So we're back to that same problem. So the reason why I wanted to move the rendering the template code into its own class is because we already have a render method here. See, we already have a render method on the base controller. So when I include my helper, uh, we already had, like, it doesn't really change. It's just going to use the one that's defined inside the class already. It's not going to use the one from the module. That's just like a way that Ruby works, which I'm fine with because I need my regular render method to work anyway. So you can't have two, you can't have two methods with the same name in Ruby, even if they're expecting different arguments. So yeah, that's interesting already. And the funny thing about this is that, so if I can just access the render method from the controller, I could try to like run some crazy code real quick. So let's try to render, just like you can do inside of the controller, you could render text, like you're rendering a response. Let's see what happens there. And now, oh look, the browser didn't even work at all. Like everything kind of broke. The HTML is not showing up correctly. That's weird. So for some reason, me running this code right here actually breaks my website. And if I don't do that, then it goes back. But yeah, this is annoying. So how can I do this? It's tricky because I need the context of these instance variables right here, and I need to pass them to my template. So this is really something that I need to figure out right now because this is not working. We have our render method here, but it's not really doing it. So maybe what if we go back to our code? So remember how we were doing the class eval right before we render the template? So what I was just thinking is, what if doing that will temporarily override the render method, but it won't override it in the controller. That's my idea. So what if we go back to what we had, which was self.class class eval do, and then basically just include the Jetski helpers, view helpers. And then ideally what happens is that we can include the helpers temporarily, and also ideally it would override the render that we have defined in the class. Now I don't know if that part is going to work. Let's see. No, it did not work. So I think it is including it, but it's not overriding it. It's still going to use the render method defined on the class, not the one included on the module. So how can we fix this? How can we fix this? So I have an idea. So what if well, the question is, yeah, it's tricky. So if I include it on the view render, let's say that we include the method, we now have it available here inside of our class, inside of the view renderer class. So what if I could somehow call render, or what if I could, this is crazy, but what if I redefine render with a custom method? But I also need to expect arguments. So let me look at the documentation for define method, because I haven't defined the method that needs arguments yet. Let's see. Oh, look, so you can say do foobar. Oh, look, and you can even do stuff like the default parameters. That's really cool. Which I guess you can do that when in blocks too. So all we have to do is just pass in some pipes, and we can pass in the arguments that we want for render. So let's say that we want path to file, and then we just say, we'll just say hello in here for now. And let's go back and reload. Okay. Okay, so yeah, it doesn't seem like it works. It seemed like it works. Look, it works at first. Weirdly, it works at first. I wonder if it actually like puts the text on the page at the bottom. No, I don't see anything. What if we try to define the hello world again? hello world. Okay, so that works like we have seen. What if we do render hello world? And then I try to define this right next to hello world, right next to where we defined hello world. We defined render, and then we pass in message, puts message. Nope, wrong number of arguments. So trying to define a method on the class when we already have a render method is breaking. So yeah, I'm kind of stuck here. Override method on class temporarily. Ruby. Look, someone asked how to temporarily redefine a method in Ruby. It says you can use instance method to get an unbound method object from any instance method. Huh. Old method name. Oh, so what? You can use the instance method on a class, and it gives you a whole object, an unbound method object. Ruby supports 2 forms of objectified methods. Okay. See, I don't really know anything about this. This is very cool. This is some stuff that I haven't really got too much into, but looks like, see, we have a method here. Then we're grabbing it with and then I don't even know what this does. Bind with another method call. Yeah. This is some advanced coding stuff. Oh, look. Wait, undefined method. That's kind of what I was looking for. So it says undef method. So what if we... But then this is gonna get rid of the render method, right? Okay. So I see hello world, but... Oh, right, because we're putting it. We're not actually returning it. I need to return it. Oh, look, hello world, hello world. So this does work. The real question is, well, what happens when we reload? Now it doesn't work. So there's like something weird going on here. Yeah, this is not gonna be a solution that we can use. Yeah, I feel silly, like I'm spending so much time on this, but this is real, like this is what it's like working on a web framework. You have to go through a lot of challenges just to like figure out how to do stuff. Okay, so where are we at right now? I got rid of the class eval and I'm now just rendering it in this context. And hypothetically, we now have, if we render it in this context, we can define the methods like hello world, and we should have them already because we've included the view helpers. Back in view helpers, oh, I guess I got rid of, we don't have hello world here anymore. So I'm gonna put that back, reload, and now we're just seeing the issue about the instance variables. But if I were to go to that view and just take out that code temporarily where we're showing the posts, check this out. So our code actually works right here, and we see the hello world message. So we're able to render the template and do everything correctly from this class. The only tricky part is getting the instance variables that we have defined inside of our controller. And I'll try to explain to you like how I was getting that before. It's pretty simple actually. All right, so I'm gonna show you inside of my code base. So if we go over to the router, so here's where we're actually running that controller method. So we have all of this complex code, which I should definitely refactor and clean up. But we're going through the routes, and we're setting up the server to listen for the route. We're doing some checks here. Now we're actually we're requiring the controller class, and then we're grabbing it with const.get. So right here we're grabbing the controller class, and then we're initializing it with the response, and we're setting these attributes on the controller class because we have adder accessors for these values, and then we're setting them here so that we can pass in, the action name and the controller name, and this is coming from the route that we have. So it's all like very cool stuff, the same stuff that Rails basically has to do, although they might handle this differently. This is how I'm handling it. I'm also passing in the cookies from the request because I'm not passing in the request to the controller. So the controller can't actually access the request currently, which I don't know if that's a bad thing, but I'm really just building this for myself anyways. And later on, if other people want to contribute, they can give ideas and stuff, and I'm open to hearing it. But anyways, right here, controller send. So we're sending the action. So this is going to try to call the method on the controller instance, and what that would be is back in the post controller when we make a request to /posts, and we know that we're going to the index action because the routes, it's going to just call this method. So anything that you have inside of here will then be, called and ran, and it will be also available in this context. So wherever we ran this method, which, yeah, it's funny because this is way, way over here, and somehow this corresponds back to, see, I'm even lost right now. It corresponds back to what, the view render? No, it goes back to the base controller. So here in the render method, here we go. So what we're looking at the router, but inside the base controller, this is the context that we'd actually have called render from. Oh, look, and that's happening right here. So when we make the request, we're initializing the controller, we're setting the values, right? Then we're calling the action, and then we're calling render. So that's where the template would be rendered. That's why we're calling this right before. So we should have, all the instance variables already in the context, already defined from the controller. So we'd have like at root. Well, that's different because this is in my framework. This is how you set the root for your app. But you'd have at posts available, and you should be able to access this inside of your template. But because I moved into a new class, now you're not able to, like, as you can see, this is the error that we see because I don't have access to those variables. So the reason why I moved it into its own class is because I wanted to find render. I want to be able to define a separate render method, just like Rails has a separate render method for the template. But this is tricky. This is so tricky. And the way that I was doing it before is, see, I was doing the controller.class eval. That's how I was doing it. But then the problem is you still have render defined there. That's basically the problem. So how do we get around this? How do we render a template in the context of the class, which we already know how to do that. We're doing that here. How do we render it with the instance variables from that controller? So if you're watching this and maybe you're thinking, maybe you totally don't know what's going on, but I know I tried this. So I thought, what if I just copy this line, controller send, and we run basically the action inside of the view renderer instead of running it there. Now, we don't want to run it more than once because, well, you guys know, inside of your app, if you make a request to an action, you expect that this code is only going to run once because you might have like callbacks, you might be like making requests. So you only want this method to be run one time per request. So that's, of course, important. But what if when we call view renderer, this actually will try to run the code here. Well, we could just, for now, we could just copy this code, controller send action name. As simple as that. We can try to run this, and maybe it'll work, and it'll give us the instance variables. Let's see. But no, it doesn't seem to work. But I also don't see an error, so I want to try to do like a binding pry. Let's see what happens here. So I think the first template is actually going to be the layout. So this really isn't important. The next one is going to be the page itself. So this is the one that we want to check. Do we have app posts available? And we don't. Now what happens if we try to do the controller send? Look, when we do this, we get we can see all the posts, and that's because, you know, in Ruby, when you call a method, it's going to return whatever the last thing was. And because the last thing was all the posts, it's going to return that. But that's not really good because we don't have access to the instance variables. And that's what I want, because let's say that the user has, like, you know, a lot, like users and, you know, all types of different stuff. We can't just rely on the return value. We have to get all those instance variables. So that's what really I'm thinking about. Now, if there was a way to just, I guess, see what instance variables we have defined, we could look at it. It looks like there is, basically. Let me check out the methods. Let's do a methods grep for instance. Oh, look. We can say controller.instance variables. Check that out. So we do have the instance variables, and then we could just pick the ones that we want, like except, well, we know what the default ones are, right? So those we don't really want to pass to the template. So let's just filter those out. The ones that I know that are defined in my library. Although for like maintenance wise, this might be annoying because then later on, I'll just have to make sure that I filter out all the ones that I don't want to pass to the view. But look, like this. Except for I spelled that wrong. I spelled except. Oh, is there not except? This should be defined, but I think that's in Rails. So instead I have to say reject or something. Controller.instance variables. So we get an array. We have a reject method. We have a filter method. Okay, let's do filter. So filter the instance variables. And we're going to check, is var in this array right here? Which I already typed it out by hand. It says undefined method in for an instance of symbol. Okay, so I guess in, that's also maybe a Rails thing. So instead we'll check on the array. Does the array include var? And controller instance variables. Let me just try to grab the first one, and it's just a key, but for some reason my filter didn't work. Oh, maybe there was, but these should have matched. It's like the colon and the @ sign, but I'm getting none back. We'll say map false. It's just all nope. Oh wait, hold up. Like I had an error in my code. I was calling methods on it. Okay, that's funny. So yeah. I think I have to take a break. So if I filter, okay, yeah, we do get those. We actually want to filter for the opposite way. So I'm just going to throw a bang on there. And the ones that we get are app posts. So that's right. So this code right here. Yeah, I might have to do this. This is like crazy code right here. But basically what I could do is, we don't even have to do this because we already called, in the router, right? We already called the action. We should have the instance variables. Right here, we need to grab all the instance variables. Oh, this is crazy. So maybe what I should do is on the base controller, we can define this array, and then we can kind of, we'll have to maintain it over here. Uh, Looks like we don't even have a private section in here anymore after I moved that code out. So I'm gonna add a private section. Or actually, I don't even think it can be private because I have to share it. Basically, it's gonna be like reserved instance variables, and it'll be an array that we have right here. These are our reserved instance variables. And we could even like use this later on for maybe giving a message to the users if they try to like override this in their template. I think that's a good idea. That's possible. Anyways, now we have this method defined on our base controller. Now back to here. So I don't even know if we should do this inside of process CRB, but I guess where else do you do it? So now we could do this again. We're going to filter and we're going to check, is the var not inside of the controller dot reserved instance variables? Although now that I'm thinking about this doesn't really need to be defined on as an instance method on a base controller. This could even be like a constant. I think that's not a bad idea. Yeah, this looks better. This looks right. And then we'll just access this. So we can say what, like controller. How do you, I don't know, maybe you can, I think, yeah, that looks right. So if this doesn't include the var, then these are the variables. Now, where do we write this? In our view renderer, maybe we'll have a method like instance variables, grab instance variables. I'll just call that that. I'll call it that. And then these are the variables, the variable names, or wait, variables from controller. So we figured out that these are the ones that aren't default. I guess, yeah, it's not really worth doing a long block. Oh, this code's pretty long. Okay, so now what do we do at this point? We're gonna have to figure this out. And I'm gonna call this right before we render the template. Let's try to test this and see if it even works. I need to get out of here. Oh. Okay, let's go back. Reload, and oh, undefined method. So yeah, okay, that's, of course, that doesn't work. Really, we can just say, we can just do it on the base controller. Jetski base controller. So it's too long, but it's okay. We'll clean up the code later. Okay, so there we go. We're inside of here. Now let's find our variables for controller. And no, it's not right. So I think I know what's happening. Oh, look, it keeps looping. Okay, that's bad. How many times do we call process CRB? It kept looping. But what we want is we want to add the bang there. So yeah, yeah, we're going to do what we have to do for now. So here we go. We have our array. So now the question is, if we grab our first instance var, how do we grab this off the controller? Can we just say controller send instance var? It says undefined method. So yeah, no, we can't just do a send. Can we do, let's check the methods again. So say methods grep instance and instance variable get. So I guess that's what we're gonna do. What we're gonna try. So we can say controller.instance variable get, and then we'll pass in our instance variable, and it works. Okay. So there we go. That's awesome. I love Ruby. That's why it's cool. Like, Ruby is totally different from Rails, but I think because Rails was so successful, That's why a lot of people have like started using Ruby. But look, I can't escape. I need to get out of this pry. Yeah, I'm just gonna quit. Hopefully, oh whoops. Yeah, we're in the wrong place. Okay. I think we made some progress here though. We're close. Yeah, so basically, yeah. Wait. I need to get out of here. Okay, so let's get rid of our binding pry. And we need to use this. We need to basically loop through each instance variable. And then grab it, grab the value. Okay, so I'm pretty sure I know what to do. So we grab the instance variable right here. This is gonna be the value. And then we are going to define an instance variable on our current controller inside the view render. So we'll say instance variable set, which I think I saw that there. And we have to give it a name. So the name is going to be instance var, and then we'll pass value. And ideally, this works. It works. Okay, this is pretty awesome. So I just figured out the solution. And it turns out it's possible to pass instance variables from one controller, from one class to another class. That's beautiful. And I feel like there should be like something even simpler, like some sort of API to easily access instance variables or something. Maybe there is. I mean there is right here. Look, there is an API. What am I saying? There's an easy API that I just used. Okay, so to finish this little feature up, let's go up to our method here. We have like performed render. I think there was a few other instance variables that I do use, like at request method and at path. So what I want to do is I want to, prevent the user from overriding these. We also have like params is one. Although some of these you do want to pass, no, at params, what am I saying? Is at params, I think we just have a params method on the base controller. Let me see. No, actually, yeah, I think we have an adder accessor for params. So maybe we should prevent the user from overriding. But wait, the question is, do we want this to be available at params, available to the page? I don't know. I think I'm overthinking this. Let's just move on. But look, it's a little buggy. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think it's a problem. Okay, this is great. This is actually really great, guys. I'm gonna go back here, and basically now we're good to go. We can keep doing what we're trying to do, which let's start by rendering the modal, because we don't have our modal right now. And look, no errors, but the modal is not there because it's not working. But we are calling render. So what we can do now is we can go back to Jetski, and let's go to our view helper. So let's go to helpers, view helpers, and let's get rid of hello worlds, that method, we don't need it. And let's move on to the code, finally. I think this was, what, like an hour or more just to get to this point, but that's what happens when you're, building your own framework. Unexpected stuff happens, and that was very important. Actually, that code that I just built was very important. I should probably push that to GitHub. So let's check a git status. Let's do a git diff and see what we really did. So we did kind of a lot. We added this reserved instance variables. We changed the way that we were running this. Instead of running our render inside of the instance eval, we are now running it inside of the correct class, and we're just passing over all the instance variables, which is crazy to think that we did this. And I did this on video. This is even cooler that I get to share it with you guys. So let me commit this. I'll just call this pass variables from controller to view renderer. Crazy. I can't believe we did that. We built that feature. I think it could be cleaned up, so let me know if you have any feedback. You can look at the code on GitHub too. But I think that was really, really cool. So maybe I'm getting kind of tired too, so I might move this into another video. But let's try to wrap up by setting up like at least a basic render method. So we have the render path to file, and then we have to find out where that path is. So the way that Rails does it is Rails actually allows you to use a relative path. So let's say we're inside of the post folder. I'm saying render modal. That's trying to use a relative path to the partial, right? Now the question is, can we do that here in the view helpers? Well, the view helpers is included on the view renderer, so we can access anything that we can access on the view renderer, which means we can access the controller. And what I'm getting to is that we need we need the path to the controller, which we have right here, path to controller. And we're using that when we render the template. So we already have everything we need. If we just go back to the view helpers, we can pass in path to controller before the path to file. And then this is going to be expecting, so let's even document this, expecting a relative path. Now Rails also allows you to specify a full path. And the way that you do that is you would start your path to file with a slash. So we can try to support that, but for now let's just do the relative path. But I already really know how to do that. And then this is going to be, or how about let's just call this partial path. And then this will be the path to file variable, or the path to, yeah, this is a variable. And we're going to pass in partial path here. And then what we're going to do is we are going to just try to like read the file. So we can say file.read. But of course, because this is a partial, it needs to begin with an underscore. So I'm gonna use some string interpolation. So I'll do the two quotes, then we'll do underscore, and then I'll interpolate the string with the path to file. So basically this is just the path to file, but with the underscore first. And now that I think about this is wrong. Hold up. Because the full path, look, this full path is gonna like start from my directory. So if I do the underscore there, it's just gonna break everything. Okay, that's wrong. That's wrong. Actually, we need to append the underscore to the partial path. So over here, we're gonna do underscore and then string interpolation. Like I said, guys, that's why I feel kind of tired. So I'm gonna take a break after this, but that's funny. I just did that wrong. Okay, so now we're reading the file. What happens now? We need to somehow, I guess that's really all it is, just returning the contents of the file, right? So technically that is all we need. Now when we do this, it says no such file or directory underscore modal. Oh, and I just realized, because in our file join, we're like writing the full path, but we didn't do the extension, the Ruby extension. So we need to, of course, end this in .html.erb because we're doing embedded Ruby. And then let's restart our server. And oh, we still get an error. HTML.erb, that's right. But it says no such file or directory. So let's go and make sure that we have the file. So we have posts underscore modal. Let's go back to the error. It says test social app post. Oh, it's not, it doesn't have the app/views. So it's trying to look for it in like the main folder of our app. That's interesting. So yeah, that's another fault. So the path to controller is really just a small part. We need to also pass in app/views right here to make sure that we're looking in the right place. Well, that's a pretty obvious one. And let's see if the modal works. It works. Boom. So just like that, we built the render method, at least a very simple version of it. And that's really what I'm trying to do with this framework. Like, mostly I'm just having fun. Like, it's so much fun. It's exciting to do something like this. But also, like, when I build these features, I'm really just trying to do the most simple and minimal approach because, well, I don't really care about thinking about all, like, the edge cases, at least not right now. And the fact that this works, I mean, this just makes me happy. And I spent so much time to get here. The next thing I want to do is actually build the view helpers like I said I was going to do, but I think I'm going to move that into another video. because this one was already so packed with, challenges and coding. And yeah, I'll see you guys again soon. Thanks for watching my videos. I hope this was interesting. And yeah, I'll come back with another video where I work on this even more.